friends, this is Jackie again, Dr. Sanders. Hope you're doing well. So I'm working on just a quick video response to David Fry's wonderful paper on the theological foundation of 1 Enoch, or 1st Enoch for the New Testament. Dave did an excellent job with this paper, and I refer to it as a short paper because this thing could go on and on and on. It would be wonderful makings of a dissertation. He has written today about making interesting allusions to the books of the canon. Enoch is not part of that. So what he does is he takes this book and evaluates the relationship of Enoch to the canonical scriptures, traces its influence upon the New Testament, and he estimates its importance as a theological influence upon the early church. So Dave kind of familiarizes the reader with this book and its relationship to the canon, which I think is foundational, and reviews the history to include dating and putting it through the rigors of tests defined for canonization. So I think this will be very interesting to look at. Enoch has gone through years of examination and use until it was ultimately eliminated from the canon. During the scriptureless period, which we call the intertestamental period, or say from Malachi to Matthew, Enoch played an important role in the influence of Jews and Christians. So the dating of this book was pretty interesting, and I think there has been some different talk about that. Maybe, before the intertestamental period, perhaps during it. But let's look at the test the 3 parameters that David has defined and researched on this test for canonicity, if that's a word. First test was argues that the writing must be from the hands of an apostle or prophet. Well, we know the Old Testament does mention Enoch, as well as the New Testament 13 times. So Enoch has been specifically designated as a prophet. Test 2 is a measure of how the content doctrinally aligns with the rest of the accepted scriptures. So Fry unpacks this nicely with scripture and uses of the book of Jude, because Jude does mention Enoch in there a couple of times. Test 3 relates to the acceptance of the book of 1st Enoch among the people of God. Now again, Jude plays a very important role in this. I would recommend reading that just to get a feel for where Enoch stands in some of his verses. So he does believe that this book, not Dave, but I think Jude does feel that and is an advocate for this writing in the canon. Also, we have to move on to the church fathers, because the more I read, the more I research, these men played a very important role in Christianity, because they were just kind of given the baton to continue to follow and run this race for Christianity, and I think they did a great job. They had a lot more writings to do, to read from rather, so they were a little, I think, more well-versed. They had moved forward in history, so they had a lot more information to pull upon, just as we do now. A few proponents of Enoch: Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, and of course we see those named in Philo as well. But there were some figures like Jerome and Rabbi Judah the Prince who viewed Enoch as apocryphal. But as time went by, Enoch was not considered part of the canon, and this was, I think, ultimately done the decision was made at the Council of Nicaea in 325. And it was believed that Enoch was perceived as incompatible with theology between Enoch and the rest of the scriptures. So, an interesting point that Dave quoted actually from Barreto was a statement that said the canon is closed not because God has spoken the final word centuries ago, but because we as Christians have together committed both to revel in and struggle with these texts through generations. So I know Dave's view is that we should not reopen the canons until the end of the church age. I'm kind of a rebel and would like to kind of look at that a little more closely and see if that's a possibility. But whatever, we certainly can learn a lot from these apocryphal books. We read them in the vein that they were delivered in. I think it can add to the substance of our knowledge during a period of time that was, as we said, a scriptureless, silent period, we think, and these books can fill in a lot about what happened. So I'm very interested in those books, and this was certainly a very interesting write-up. Now, David does a great job in looking at providing us with charts that he has made, not just from Jude comparing to Enoch, but also John, Paul, Matthew, and Luke. And he states that the degree of similarities between the New Testament writers and Enoch are not necessarily coincidental. So here we have another kind of influence that perhaps we had not studied before, we didn't know, kind of like Philo, that we see these early years of Christianity was just surrounded by tons of things that were good influences and perhaps obviously bad influences that these Christian leaders had to deal with. Dave does a great study, a great case study of an exegetical review of Jude 13 and 2 Peter. And he also discusses in his paper the Son of Man discussion. I would love to see this in another entire paper or perhaps in a dissertation, because I think that phrase is just so very, very interesting. And Dave states where he found it, and what questions it raises, and how significant it was. I think David has clearly made obvious that First Enoch is a book to be reckoned with in providing an influence to the New Testament writers. And we kind of know that because we know Enoch was seventh generation from Adam. And also, Dave presents this with good detail, good foundation, good substance, and a lot of good references that if we wanted to pursue more ourselves, we could do that, which is something I would like to do. Very well organized. The subject matter was smooth, it was flowing. And I just learned a whole lot from these papers. And I hope I have time to read everyone else's paper, not just Julia's and David's, but certainly both of those were excellent. And so, again, I thank you, David, for allowing me to look at your paper, do a review of it of sorts, but to know that you have opened my mind to another facet of the biblical studies that we are in. And that is part of why I'm coming to this school, is to learn more and more. And you have helped me greatly, so I thank you very much for that, Dave. Have a great Christmas.